Welcome to another episode of the Safety in Numbers podcast. All right, let's talk about it. On this episode of the Safety in Numbers podcast, episode 8, we're going to be looking at the best way to approach the school when there is an issue. When I was looking into writing this podcast, I admit I was torn because I am not a parent. So I don't know what it's going to be like for a parent to approach the school when there is an issue at school. I know what it is like from the opposite end of being a teacher who is approached by parents. So when I started, after I'd been teaching a while, I kind of started looking into what things were like from a parent's point of view. And I started asking a lot of questions of my friends who are parents. With any interaction that I have with parents or anyone, basically boil down to these three principles. I don't remember where I got them. I'm always listening to podcasts and watching videos and things like that to help improve my communication and conflict resolution skills. So I don't remember where I got them, but I did get them from somewhere. I found the little note that I had written them on when I was cleaning out when I was moving my office, and it made me go, oh yeah, that's really the basis of all of these interactions. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. When you approach somebody with criticism or condemning them or complaining to them, you automatically shut down the paths of communication because that person's going to feel attacked. So they're not going to want to communicate you if you are criticizing them, or if you are condemning them and judging them, or if you're complaining all the time. It takes the brain down the path of wallowing in misery rather than solving a problem. Give honest and sincere appreciation. And this is very important. Don't overlook this one because it turns your brain toward a possible solution finding. It says, hey, there is good in this person that I'm talking to. Therefore, we might actually be able to come to to resolve this issue and move forward with in a better light. And the third one is think in terms of what the other person wants and why they want that, or consider things from their point of view. Most of the time, situations are about a misunderstanding. So if you can see things from their point of view and think about, okay, what does this person want? And you may disagree with what they want, but if you understand what they want, you have a better way of approaching them. And it's not like you're just going to bulldoze over them because people don't appreciate being bulldozed and they're less likely to work with you or even hear what you're saying. And that's the one thing you want is the person at the school to hear what you're saying and say, this is the problem that I have. I would like to come up with a solution. If you want them to hear that, then you have to understand what they want and why they want what they want. You have a better understanding to approach them in a way in which they will hear. So you don't assume the worst of the person. The worst might be possible, yes. But if you assume that that's what the actual thing is, sometimes you can bring about the worst situation or an even worse situation by assuming it. So, yes, understand the worst may be possible, but don't expect the worst to actually occur. These principles are actually throughout these slides and the last podcast when we were talking about talking with angry parents. These three principles are one of those things that guided those interactions, along with a lot of other material. Love and Logic produced a CD series a long time ago about parent-teacher conferences and how you talk with the parents. Learned so much from that and from Dr. Glasser's work as well. So with those principles in mind, these are some considerations you should think about before you go into the school. Question your child thoroughly, and even then, you still might not know the whole story. Your child may not understand the entire situation because they're a child and they don't have a lot of experience in understanding all the different possibles in a situation. So they might think it's one way and they really just don't have a clue what is actually going on. And then ask yourself, is it possible that my child is not telling me the whole truth or is slanting their story? Now, there are some children who are much more prone to lying than other children, and you know your child better than anybody else. So think about, What's my child's proclivity for telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Are they likely to slant things? And if you know your child is likely to stretch the truth or maybe leave stuff out to make themselves look better, take that into consideration. It's not a point to condemn the child. I mean, that you probably did that as a child yourself. I know I did. But realize that it's possible that you don't know the whole story, even though you've questioned your child thoroughly. And there are probably other factors that might come into play on the issue. So it just depends on what the issue is as to what the other factors are. But your kid doesn't often see all that is involved in a classroom situation or even in a school-wide situation. They see what they see from their point of view, and that's valid. But there are other points of view to consider. So just realize that there might be some information out there that might change your perspective on this. Getting all the information is important. Keep your fears in check. We went over these in the last video, and it really is the same fears. So just be aware, is this fear in my heart? Am I actually afraid that my child is missing out or falling behind? It's possible. It's possible that that's just a fear. It's possible that it's a baseless fear, or it's possible that it's true. But be aware that that fear is there. There is a lot of fear out there if you listen to some things that have happened in other schools. You may hear stories on the radio or on YouTube or on whatever other platforms about things that go on in other schools, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, all schools are bad. All teachers are bad. Things that happen in other schools are not likely to be happening in all schools. Because if you think about the sheer number of schools out in just our country of America versus the ones that you hear about on the news or on the radio or on somebody's podcast, there's not that many that are going wrong. Now, that's not to say that there couldn't be something going wrong at your child's school. But try not to assume that that's the situation before you go in. Because fears can make a little problem into a big problem. I have seen this happen a number of times. Get all of the information first. Once you understand the facts in the situation, then you'll understand better how to approach the school. I've seen situations in which parents approach the school, they just come marching in and they start automatically yelling at the school staff and at the school principal and at any teacher that they see, yelling at them and pointing their fingers. You're indoctrinating my child with your beliefs and blah, blah, blah. Well, there are some teachers who do that. I have seen it happen before. I've seen all the stuff that you've seen on YouTube and on podcasts and on TV news. There are some teachers who teach inappropriate things, but it is not most teachers. So ask those questions before you accuse the teachers. Figure out what's going on for real at your child's school, because it might not be like that child's school that's in California or in who knows where else. It might be something that is totally different. Get the information before you approach your child's school, or you could make a small problem into a really big problem. How should you go in to deal with the issue? So you've decided that there's an issue. You have questioned your child. You have gotten a lot of other information, perhaps from other parents or something else, and you've decided you need to approach the school. How should you do it? Start by being calm, adult, and conversational. Most of the time, issues can be worked out with a simple conversation, because most of the time there are two sides of the issue, and once you understand their side and they understand your side, then you can easily come up with a solution. That is the majority of all problems that I have ever faced in my 26 years of teaching. The goal is, when you approach the school, remember, keep this goal in mind. Get more information, and then you can make a better decision as to what the best next steps are. Then decide whether or not you can solve this problem with a phone call, or if you need to go down in person, or if you need to just shoot an email. Sometimes shooting an email can get you more information that you need to, in order to decide whether you need to actually go in person. So I would start with the email, but make sure it's like worded kindly and asking questions rather than accusing again. Like, Little Johnny told me this. Can you tell me more about that? Or I have this a question about that. Just to get more information. Once you have that information, then you can decide if you need to call that person and talk to them, or if you need to address it in person. I personally like addressing problems in person because I can read somebody's body language better than I can read their email. So if I can see that they're tense and they're upset, I can respond in kind so that I can help calm them down. I don't get that in an email. You can also do that somewhat in a phone call. And last, begin your conversation by asking questions. And here are some questions that you might ask. Can you tell me about what happened? That's a great way to start a conversation. That way you get the teacher's perspective. You already have your kid's perspective because you've already questioned them. So now you're getting the teacher's point of view. What were the words that you use? Ask, has this happened before? There are a lot of times in my classroom that there are issues that happen and I'm able to resolve them in the classroom. And then I don't speak to the child. I don't talk to parents about every little issue that happens in my classroom. If I did, I would spend hours typing up emails or calling parents. That doesn't happen. So, but if an incident happens, you as the parent need to know, has it happened before? That way you can understand if this is a quick onset of a problem, or has this problem been building over time? And that gives you more information on how to deal with it. What are our options? And then always address, what if it happens again? Well, then we can do these steps. That way the teacher has a plan in mind and you know what the teacher is planning on doing should it happen again. Another thing you can always say, if you're not sure what question to ask, is, can you tell me more about that? Getting more information for yourself because you weren't there whenever the issue or the incident happened. So tell me more about that. These are just a few questions that you might consider when you approach a school, because I know I've had several parents that approach me and they were really nervous about coming to school and talking to me about it because of their fears. Most teachers, and I've worked with a lot of teachers and I have gone to conferences with lots and lots of teachers, and the vast majority of teachers that I've ever worked with do have your child's best interest at heart. That's their heart. That's why they became teachers, because they want to help children. They want to teach children and help them grow into good, strong adults. Come into a situation assuming that that's what that teacher has in mind. I am not saying that all teachers are like that. I have taught with some teachers who I disagreed with, and I myself approached them. So the teacher was teaching something that I thought was inappropriate to students, and I heard students talking about it. I went to that teacher and I talked to them and I told them what my issues were with what they were teaching. They had some words with me. We had a few words around, and the next year they didn't teach that again. But I approached it also. So I'm not saying that they don't exist, but I am saying that most of the time, those issues that you hear about on like YouTube or on news or that like go viral are not happening in most classrooms. You have to do the legwork to figure out what really is happening in your child's classroom before you go and accuse a teacher of doing something that they didn't actually do. So now you've gotten to the bottom of what the problem is. What are the next steps? So once both sides have a complete understanding of the issue, consider what the best next steps are together. As teachers, and I taught 7th grade, so I often had, over the entire day, I would teach usually around 120 students. In one school, it was more like 180 to 200 students. It depends on the population. So what I am able to do is a bit limited because I have to also interact with all of my students. So I can't put most of my time towards a single student. There were some students who were much more independent and I could leave them alone, and other students who needed me more and I could focus in on those. But there are a lot of students who need to have equal attention or need to have just as much of my attention as your child does. So consider that when you're thinking of your next steps. If you make a plan that the child must follow, if necessary. It's not always necessary, but I had many, many parents approach me with things, and this is the thing I probably heard more than anything else. Would you please go to my child's locker and make sure they put their homework in their backpack? No, no, I won't do that. So what I always talk to parents about if they come to me with that request is I always automatically say, no, I'm not going to do that. But here's what I've heard some other parents say or do when their kid didn't bring their homework home. And I got this from a parent, what I'm about to tell you, from a parent in like the first 5 years of my teaching. I don't remember exactly when it was, but they had this genius idea. Their kid would not bring their homework home, refused, would just leave it all at school. The parent went to like Walmart or Target or someplace like that and bought some of those little workbooks that you can fill in the spaces. They got one for English and they got one for math and social studies and science. And whenever that kid didn't bring their homework home, they made them do a page out of each one of those books. And I was like, huh, okay. Well, the parent came to me later and said the kids started bringing their homework home because they figured, well, if mom's going to make me do this, I might as well actually get the homework home from school. I don't know if that would happen with your kid, but I thought that was a pretty amazing solution to that problem. Always have a way to follow up if the problem persists. As the parent, also keep in touch with the teacher. Shoot them an email every now and then, just say, I'm curious how things are working out, if you've had any more issues with what we had discussed. Keeping those communication lines open is important because as a teacher, sometimes you get piled on with stuff on top of stuff on top of stuff on top of stuff, just like parents do. And you may have meant to send an email home to that parent saying, oh, little Johnny's starting to go back into his old ways again. But because after school there was an emergency parent meeting with this other thing, or there was an IEP meeting that wasn't scheduled, or all of a sudden you have to go to a professional development thing and you weren't able to get to that and it got shoved to the bottom of your to-do list. Stuff like that happens all the time. So just be aware. Shoot an email out and say, hey, how's my kid doing? Usually I can answer those just by off the top of my head. So these are some example situations of how parents have approached me, that some of them were good and some of them are not so good. The first one is if there is a questionable assignment that your child is given. So this happened many years ago, in which I've done this assignment a lot because most of the time kids like it. It's when I teach about ratios and scales. I would have the kids do a scale model of their bedroom, a floor plan of their bedroom. So they would have to measure their room and scale it down to be on a grid paper. A parent had a real problem with me wanting to know what was in their child's bedroom. And when they approached me about it, they were actually really calm and they're like, I just don't think it's appropriate for you to want to know what's in my child's bedroom. And I was like, okay, I can see that. Can they do another room in the house? And they're like, well, what's the purpose of this assignment anyway? And so I explained what it was about and they were like, oh, okay, yeah, how about we do the living room? And I'm like, okay, that's great. And compromise was made. Not a problem. I didn't think anything of a child making a scale model of their bedroom, but the parent thought it was weird. And when they explained, and I understood. I was like, okay, it's not what I meant, but I understand where the misunderstanding is coming from now, and we can easily find a solution. The student's test score was bad. This is the one in which I think I've already told you about, in which I accidentally transposed an 81 into an 18. The parent came in and they were angry and they accused me of singling out their child because I didn't like them. And when they told me that, I was like, that's not true. You know, your child is really good. And I thought that she did really well on the test. And they're like, well, then why did you give her an 18%? And I was like, an 18? She shouldn't have gotten an 18. And that's when I realized I had mistakenly put it in the grade book that way. And so when I checked, I was like, oh, no, I am so sorry. I transposed it. It should have been an 81. And so then the parent realized that I wasn't actually picking on the child. I had made a mistake. Teachers are human. That happens a lot. When I fixed it and explained what happened to the parent, everybody was happy. And the parent apologized for yelling at me, and I apologized for making the mistake. So remember, when you go in, there might be something going on that you don't realize, like an accidental transposition of a score. Student has a problem with a seating chart. I've had lots of parents come in and tell me that they don't want their child sitting by child X or child Y. And I want you to realize that teachers, there's a lot that goes into doing a seating chart. So much more than you might realize as a parent. Because, and I hated doing seating charts, hate doing seating charts with a passion, because there is no way to satisfy everyone involved. It just is not possible. Because you have students who have IEPs that require them to sit in the front of the classroom or require them to sit near the teacher. You have students with 504s that require them to sit in certain areas of the classroom. And you don't know who those are. You're the other parent. You don't know how many of those I have in my classroom. Sometimes I am able to accommodate for you don't want your child to sit by X or Y. Most of the time I did not, because if they're not getting along with child X now, they might be best friends with them later. Or they might be best friends with child X and then they have an argument and I have to shuffle the entire classroom to satisfy their argument. And that's not a reasonable solution to the problem. So if you have a problem with the seating chart, come talk to the teacher first and see if there is anything that can be done. Just explain your point of view. Like, this is what's happened in the past between my child and that child, and this is why I would prefer them not to sit by each other. And talk with the teacher about it. Sometimes solutions are possible. Sometimes you just have to teach your kid how to deal with that situation without moving away from it. Learning how to deal with a difficult situation as a child is a really good skill to have. And we've already talked about students with missing assignments a little bit. So if your child has a missing assignment, that has so much complexity about it as to why the assignment might be missing, that you really need to ask the teacher about what the assignment was and when was it due and why is it not there. And a lot of times it's in the child's locker and it just doesn't have their name on it. So sometimes it was a nameless paper, sometimes it was in the child's locker, sometimes it's something that the child just wasn't sure about. There's so many reasons why there are missing assignments. Several things I want you to remember. If you come in and fight before talking, you create a greater tension between you and the school staff. Creating greater tension makes communication so much more difficult. Ask more questions and then decide how to approach it. Something else to keep in mind. There are some problems that parents need to come and help their child with. There are some problems that the child needs to learn to solve on their own. Kids learn how to be strong and confident adults by solving their own problems. As the parent, you can coach the child through their problem. Like, what's going on, child? Child says, I got a bad grade in my math class. Parent says, what are some things that went into that bad grade? And you talk about studying, and you talk about homework, and you talk about listening, and you talk about making a plan, just you and your child. And if that plan doesn't work, perhaps get the teacher involved. But be their coach, especially at the middle school level. A parent's coaching through can help their child learn how to solve their own problems, or the majority of those problems. And I know as a parent, you have a huge responsibility on your shoulder when you're raising your child. But you're raising a child to be a good, strong adult. And in raising your child, you have to consider if the situation at school could be an opportunity for your child to learn something about how to deal with difficult people, or about how to be a person of integrity, about how to do what you don't want to do before you go off to play. These are situations in which a child sometimes has to fall down before they learn how to get up. And so allowing them to fail once in a while can actually be a huge learning experience. So there was once, not long ago actually, when I had a child, and the kid was a good kid, but he was easily manipulated by his friend group. And he would do all of his pre-algebra homework perfectly. Great. And then he would text his homework to his friends. And then his friends texted it to everybody in the class. And so it looked, now as a teacher, I was aware of what was going on. And I told them, like, I can't prove it. I can't prove that you copied off of somebody's paper. But I can guarantee you that if that's what happened, you will not pass the test. And I told them this daily. And I sent out an email to parents telling them that I suspected this is what was happening. And I told them, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if your child is involved, but be aware that this has happened in the past. And so going into the test, I told them, I was like, okay, just make sure that you are prepared and know how to do this. And the majority of students failed that test. And I'm talking, there was one B, and that was the kid that actually did his homework. And the rest, I think there was one D, and the rest were Fs. And this was a class of 30. So 28 kids failed that test. 28 kids came to me wanting to retake that test. And I told them, no. I told you from the beginning, this is how you pass my tests. My tests are not retakeable. So parents came to me and talked to me about it, and they talked to their kid about it, and I didn't allow any of them to retake the test. And I told the students, in the future, if you choose to copy your homework either off of the internet or off of a friend, you're not going to know how to do my tests, because I don't get my tests off the internet. My tests came out of a book, tests that I had used for years. And I had a variety of tests that I would choose from, and I never used the same test year after year. Once you've been teaching the same subject that long, you get lots of backup stuff like that. Each one of those students thought they were being super smart and knew how to game the system. And it ended up coming back and teaching them a very valuable lesson about being honest and a person of integrity. So in that case, those kids learned a lesson. Sometimes there's something going on in which a parent needs to step in, and you as the parent, you do have to make that decision. If a parent steps in when a child could be coached to solve the issue themselves, then the parent is sending the message to the child that that child is incapable of solving simple problems. And that message creates a child who feels that they are not strong, and then they fear any time they have a challenge coming up to them. And they won't take that challenge because they don't think that they are capable, because the adults in their life have led them to believe they're not capable, because every adult in their life has solved their problems for them or allowed them to step around problems. I have a real problem with schools who allow students who have failed every class and they promote them to the next grade anyway. I have had that happen many times in which you could look on their grades from 5th grade all the way up to 7th grade. It was F, 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 and they were promoted on anyway. And what that did is teach that child that you're not capable of doing difficult things, so we're going to just let you go on anyway. It's a bad message to send to a kid. I'm also not saying that there aren't times when parents need to step in. There are. Be wise about those decisions and think about, is this something that my kid can learn how to solve on their own? Thanks for watching and joining me on the Safety in Numbers podcast, and I'll see you in our next episode.